Let's read starting in verse 21. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside, and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha kumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Nice. All right. So, Jesus steps off the boat, and a crowd almost immediately gathers. Jairus is a ruler of the synagogue, something like an executive pastor who is not heavily involved in the teaching, but more with the operations. From what we've already read in Mark, we know that the rulers and religious leaders by this point have started to look at Jesus with kind of a cocked head, saying, we're not so sure. And they begun to sort of distance themselves from him. So it comes as a surprise, if you're reading this for the first time, to see Jairus striding up to Jesus. And then, wow, he falls on the sand. My little daughter. He's humbling himself, taking kind of a professional or social risk, but we understand why. Fathers and daughters, right? You get it, fathers and daughters. So if we just say that, we understand Jairus completely. Obviously, Jairus has faith in Jesus' ability to do something here. He must have heard stories about Jesus and found those testimonies compelling, so that in his moment of trouble, he thinks of Jesus. And actually, we'll observe the same thing with the woman who had, quote, heard the reports about Jesus, and so she shoved her way through the crowd. One more thing about Jairus, kind of the strange wording. He says in verse 23, "Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." That be made well and live. So the point is not simply that she not be sick, but he has the imagination. Let's get her back to living, reading, learning, obeying the commandments, skipping birthday parties, games, eventually probably marriage, whatever the image-bearing vocation was hers. Get her back to that. We don't have Jesus' response, but except that he starts on the way with her, and the crowd throngs about him. You see famous people, and by this time Jesus is famous, you see famous people on TV walking from their car into the gala. You'll see a bunch of ropes to kind of cordon off the throngs, and if those become impractical, then you see bodyguards forming a wall. But here's Jesus with no buffers, and the disciples aren't his bodyguards. In the crowd, in verse 24, is a desperate individual, an ill woman who remains nameless throughout, who's decided to approach Jesus from in back of him and just touch his garment so that she may be healed. For the past 12 years, using some imagination here, well, not the 12 years, but she's been troubled, her life hampered, hadn't been able to really live because she leaked blood. For 12 years, doctors had taken her money and prescribed treatment, but she was only getting worse. She was almost certainly anemic and carried this constant feeling of being weak and sleepy. She woke up tired. She was dizzy, always kind of out of it. Yeah? Think about it. 12 years scheduling appointments, sitting in waiting rooms, prodded with this or that instrument, giving the doctors giving her this or that foul-tasting concoction, and yet no improvement. And now she's out of money. Her life had been constricted and painful, and it was heading south. Okay. And of course, there are also social consequences to this sickness, but not just connected to embarrassment. The ancient laws rendered those who had bodily discharges religiously impure. And so they should just stay away from others so as not to stain them. And so she was compromising others on this day just by being out and about. Okay, there's the background. After she touches Jesus' clothes from behind, though, there's no question about it, she's healed. And I don't know, I've never had something like this happen. Maybe some of you have. Talk to me afterwards. Just imagine a 12-year worry or pain taken from you in a second. It's normally like a gradual, but this is like in a second. And you just imagine, does she like stop in the middle of that throng and just kind of let it sink in? Or does she like start weeping for joy? Anyway, Jesus stops though, and here's where it gets a little mysterious, right? When Jesus stops, just think about this. He turns around, knowing that someone has approached him from the back. That fact is kind of interesting. He senses that his clothes were touched purposely. That's interesting. I believe this is the only time in the Gospels when we have a phrase like this, when it says Jesus, verse 30, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? But then you think, what, gone out from his head? Gone out from his body? I mean, from where was it gone out? What did that feel like? And then the mystery deepens. We have some God-man mystery for you today, because power leaves Jesus without his willing it. Yeah, I was waiting for the Yeah, that's good stuff there. And goes to a destination of which he is not aware. But not that it weakens you. Mark doesn't say that Jesus was weakened by healing the woman. It's just that he knew his power has gone out. I mean, he's not swaying back and forth saying, someone give me some avocados or something. I need some strength back. He's not doing that. Also, notice that what healed the woman is not that which was outside of Jesus that he had access to, but it was an energy within Jesus himself. Yeah? I haven't done anything like this yet in the sermon, but I think we could say something generally here, that humans don't need something Jesus has access to. They need what? They need Jesus. Yeah. Anyway, with all this mystery, I'm saying you could take a good 2 or 3 mile walk and just mull over this, because it's wow, it really makes you think. Jesus says, "Who touched my garments?" And just kind of a side note, once again, I love these little moments because they really say a lot. We get an idea of the disposition of Jesus by how his disciples answer him. What I'm saying is, his disciples take up the role of Captain Obvious. Like, well, you're going through a crowd, right? And the subtext is, oh yeah, teacher, you're great for the teaching and the miraculous stuff, but you really don't know how real life works. And here's what I'm saying, and you see this a lot, how approachable Jesus must have been, where they felt free to just like, what? They're kind of calling Jesus a moron, okay? And his disciples can easily slip into patronizing him, and he kind of rolls with it. But I want you, okay, let's stop, pause, and just take in the whole setting here. A little bit imagination, but I think it's okay. Jesus already made drowsy by the roll of the waves. He disembarks from the boat and immediately is met by crowds. Then thrust headlong into this emotional scene of fathers and daughters involving the synagogue president. Then he's kind of pushed along. Now someone's taken advantage of him. Now his followers are kind of treating him like a child, and he knows they're wrong. Isn't Jesus going to snap at them? No, he doesn't. He doesn't snap, but he does ignore them, okay? And he keeps looking around the crowd. But here, this is interesting. You thought we've already had the dramatic moment when the woman was healed, but that's not. As Mark's telling the story, what's the dramatic moment? It's right here. It's a question. Who touched me? Like, there's the pause. And it's the idea is, will the woman take but not acknowledge the gift? Will she, out of timidity or out of pride, kind of slink into the background and head back home? That's actually, this text is focusing on that. And you think, well, what does it matter if the woman acknowledges it? She's been healed. She can be privately grateful. Won't that be enough? Or will she confess with her mouth, make a public statement of the powerful working of Jesus. Who's Mark written to? The church in Rome. Yeah, Gospel of Mark is written to the church in Rome, the same one to which Paul wrote these words: "For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved." Okay, she comes forward, resolution, but not triumphantly, but with fear and trembling, and like Jairus, falls down before Jesus. And she tells him the whole truth. Verse 33. Okay. How much detail is entailed in telling him the whole truth? Unknown. But we do know that her declaration came at a cost, because he now knows that she has touched him and thereby exposed himself, and before that, the whole crowd around her, to uncleanness. Yeah? His response to all this in verse 34 is partly baffling. I don't know if you're baffled, but I'm kind of baffled. He says, "Your faith has made you well." Let me ask a question. What was her faith? So, I heard that, Brian. Was it their faith that she became convinced that Jesus could heal her? Or that she acted on this conviction by pushing her way through the crowds? Or the public confession of her healing? And all God's people said, yes. Yes. Next, he says, "Go in peace." Okay? Go in peace. Yeah, that's good. That's expected. But then, what's this? Just listen carefully. "And be healed of your disease." Wait, what? You understand? I mean, if I were the woman, I'd look at Jesus after he said that. I'd look at Jesus for a couple of seconds after he said that. Like the way the taxi driver looks at you after he drops you off at the airport and tells you to have a good trip, and you reply, "Thanks, you too." The idea is that Jesus says, "Be healed of your sickness," and the woman thinks, "Well, yes, I have been healed of my sickness." Yeah? You've already done that. But I always like to think Jesus doesn't drop any empty words. Do you agree? It was one of the things that Peter said to him. Peter, who gave Mark his material, Peter says, "No deceit was ever found in his mouth." And part of what is deceptive is like, filler. And none of that was in Jesus' mouth. And so these words meant something. Be healed of your disease. Did he just mean, okay, the disease will not return? Or did he point to a deeper sickness, which had also been healed by her faith in Jesus? As Jesus concludes their exchange, messengers from the house of Jairus, now we're in verse 35, recall us to the original problem. Their announcement, to say the least, is gloomy and insensitive. Your daughter is dead. And then it gets worse. Rather than thinking to console him, their first concern is for Jesus' convenience. They say, "Why trouble the teacher any further?" Come on, guys. Do better with that announcement. But the rudeness of this bleak question emphasizes the finality of this whole thing, that there had been hope, but now it's run out. And so reallocate resources to other things now, things that can still be brought back from the brink. We don't hear anything from Jairus in the middle of that, but we only hear Jesus. And I can picture him beside Jairus and kind of grabs the top of his arms and says, "Do not fear, only believe." Looks him in the eye. Yeah, I like that. Do not fear, only believe. Okay, where are we here? Yeah, verse 37. Notice that Jesus orders the crowd to stay and takes only 3 disciples the rest of the way to Jairus' house. Again, a little detail that has my attention. Before, he had seemed to be kind of at the mercy of the crowd, being pulled along. But now he tells them to stay away, and they simply comply. As they draw near to his house, Jairus is following Jesus' directions and trying to stave off fear. But it's becoming much more difficult, because they arrive to skilled mourners on the scene. They see, they hear, further ingraining on Jairus' mind the reality of death. And I can imagine at this point, Jesus' bracing words, do not fear, start to sort of vanish and sucked into this current of loss and grief. A little note that before Jesus does what he's going to do, he takes the time to speak to the mourners. This is fascinating. He challenges their whole mourning. He says, "Why are you making a commotion?" And I think that's important, because try getting in the way of people's grief. People are savage when it comes to their grief, and he gets right in the middle of it. He says, "Why are you doing this?" Jesus is a man of guts. Jesus contra mundum. Jesus against the world sometimes in small ways. Okay, Jesus says the child is not dead, but sleeping. Now we have another mystery, right? When he says the child is not dead, but sleeping. In Luke's parallel account, Luke has this story too, we hear that the child's spirit had in fact departed from her. So, we'll take Jesus at his word that she wasn't dead, but she was dead. And I think the takeaway is we don't understand death. We don't understand death. And just as we saw in last week's sermon, there are specificities to death and to life that we're just not aware of. And so that Jesus can say of the dead girl, truly, she is not dead. Yeah? Into the girl's chamber go Jesus and the 3 disciples, along with the girl's mom and dad. And so no one else will see this miracle. And again, we moderns always think the bigger the crowd to see the thing, the better. And we kind of don't understand the power or the weakness of publicity. All right. Again, Jesus exposes himself to impurity as he grabs the girl's hand. Talitha Kumi sounds like an Elvish. That sounds like very Elvish. You could hear Legolas or one of those other people saying that. But had you ever wondered why does leave words untranslated? This is in Aramaic. So Bible's written the New Testament's written in Greek. Here we have an Aramaic word. Why? Why don't they translate it? And where does Mark know about this? It must have been Peter who was on the scene years later, recalled to Mark the exact words Jesus used. And I would imagine what probably engraved these words in Peter's mind, he was able then to relate to Mark, was their mundaneness. This is not a beautiful phrase. I mean, it sounds cool to us, but it's not a beautiful phrase. It's certainly not mystical or magical. It's a perfectly everyday phrase, or at least school day phrase. I would say, Liesel, wake up. It's that sort of, Liesel, come on, wake up. It's not like, Liesel, wake up. Let us have school today. It's like, Liesel, get up, come on. That's the force of this, yeah? And the girl opens her eyes. I love that. Imagine being called back from, death adjacent, and opening your eyes and, oh, Jesus. She gets up. She's completely ready for the day. It was that fast. And not a trace of illness to be found. And Mark uses her getting up and to walk to inform us for the first time that the girl was old enough to walk. Right? Up until this point, we don't know. How old is this girl? In fact, Mark says she was 12 years old. You're like, 12 years. Wait, 12 years? And with that, we have another connection made to the nameless woman, sick for 12 years, that Jesus had healed almost accidentally. And we are, with this, invited to compare and contrast the two healings. The bleeding woman has endured long years of decline and sees her energy and resources coming to an end. Because of her illness, she is necessarily on the outskirts of society. And Mark accentuates this by not giving her a name, like she's the woman. Jairus and his daughter, on the other hand, have over those same 12 years built up good memories. Jairus is a success. His daughter must have enjoyed the fruits of that success. There is warmth and there is love. And then, to quote Job, I love this phrase from Job, what I feared the most has come upon me with Jairus. Two types of tragedy, maybe the only two types of tragedy. Here we have the solution to the basic human problems of decline towards death or life suddenly taken away. And the solution is the same, that being Jesus. Okay. I think the gospel writers occasionally would dabble in humor. This might be an example. I think we're left with a little bit of humor. No one's more practical than the Creator God, Jesus, and he's the only one that remembers, oh yeah, she's hungry. When your girls returned from ice skating, they head right for the fridge, okay? How much more of an appetite do you work up when your spirit makes its way back to your body? It must have been, you must really get hungry at those times, okay? And then Mark wraps up the story with a nod toward privacy. For now, no one should know about this resurrection. Let people imagine that something less spectacular happened. Okay, we good? A couple of concluding thoughts. Oh, shoot. Yeah. The church that reads this Gospel of Mark should recognize they've been in a parallel situation with the woman who pressed through the crowd. Something has been wrong with us, with me, something central that was draining life out. and rendered us stained before God and man. And the world, we're in decline in such a way that nothing under the sun could fix us. Yeah? Only when, this is important, and it will sound a little bit of a cliche stuff, but if you listen carefully, it won't be a cliche. You ready? Listening in? Are you dialed in? Only when I realize that I am deeply sick. I am deeply sick. The problem, the stain on the world before God is not the libs. It's not the corporations. It's not the alt-right or the gays or the Trump supporters or the fill in the blank. The problem is in me. Does that make sense? That's key. Yeah? But then I realized that Jesus has already gotten to the heart of the problem, and he's already solved it. After Jesus made purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. On Jesus' cross, my guilt was laid on the Jesus body, and I am clean. And I acknowledge and I make it my public identity. I am fully immersed into the fact that Jesus is the Lord who is able to, and in fact has already rescued me from my deepest problem, and that his Spirit has already began in me the great renewal that will sweep over the planet. And when these things are true of us, we hear the Spirit of Jesus speak authoritatively to us, be healed of your dis-ease. Yeah? So it's very important that we start with that the problem is in me first. We often think, well, there's some part of the world that once we get rid of that group idea, then we can move forward. But no, we start with the idea, the problem that has to be dealt with is here, Colin. Yeah? Good? The church that reads this Gospel of Mark should recognize their parallel situation with Jairus as he approaches his house. As the years wear on and we march into the age to come, a Christian experiences disappointment after disappointment, sadness, tragedy, and that fills more and more fills our vision. And yet we have, and sometimes this is the only thing we have Jesus' words, looks you in the eye, do not fear, only believe. Be of good courage. I remember visiting an old woman who was sick, and she encouraged me by quoting Isaiah. Fear not, here, listen to this. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. But often the internal and the external noise threatens to drown out those assurances. And the mourners are present in your face, and they're loud. And the voices of doubt and fear are in your head, and they're loud, and they're alarming, and they're harassing. But this is what this passage is for. It's for the church to say, do not despair. Don't panic, church. Don't panic. I like to think that Mark left the Aramaic untranslated because that's exactly the phrase, maybe even in the language, the church will one day hear. The bridegroom will whisper over his bride, Talitha Kumi. and the church will rise from the dead. An old Puritan advised preaching this way. This is what he said. Here's how you should preach. This is what I do. I preached as never sure to preach again, and as a dying man to dying men. So, my fellow dying human, what is Jesus saying to you today? To you? Among other things, I hope you're receiving this message. Get to Jesus. Then, stay with Jesus. The title of this sermon is You, now I'm not speaking plural, I'm speaking individual. One, okay. Okay. Ooh. You need Jesus. And of course, that's a little complicated because he isn't physically present in our dimension. But then a brief response is to say, this fact is not anything like a crippling limitation. Jesus has left ways of opening the door to fellowship with him. And you hear that? Jesus has left ways of opening the door to him and having fellowship. And this is what he has done. This is what he has set in place. Let me just rattle them off. Get baptized. Join and partner with his body, the church. Sit under his teaching. Remember, young adults, these are my brother and sisters and mother, those that are listening to me. Pray in his name. Learn to observe all that he commanded. Eat with him at his supper. And there is rich fellowship with him in these things. It's even as I rattle them off, they sound kind of impersonal. No, they're not. They sound impersonal, but submit, and you'll find it to be warm and personal, knowing Jesus this way. And really what could keep you from him is pride. And so learn from this nameless woman in Jairus that life is valuable enough, uncleanness unto death is desperate enough, and Jesus is actually the answer. And so that it makes sense to fall at his feet. Jesus, I come at your feet.